Hello there, everybody. My name is Mike Heck, and hope you're not sick of me yet. And welcome to the UFC on ESPN 9 post-fight show, live right here on MMAfighting.com, virtually alongside Alex K. Lee. We've rearranged things here for the post-fight show. It was Jose, and now Alex and I are in together now. So we got two Limp Bizkit references, and hopefully the only two within the first minute. But Alex, let's get right into this thing. First question, overall thoughts on this return to Las Vegas for the UFC from start to finish. What would be your letter grade, Professor?
First of all, 16 million copies worldwide. Limp Bizkit, significant other. All right, 16 million copies. That people used to buy albums, kids. Just a long time ago. But yes, to talk about the card tonight, it was really good. I mean, it was. I know people will look at the co-main event and maybe take that one fight, which was somewhat lackluster, and because it's happened near the end, it's going to maybe drag the overall letter grade down. But I did not think it took away that much from the rest of the card. It wasn't even like a horrible fight. It just was uneventful, especially compared to some of the other action we saw, because we saw at least three fights that were like worthy of fight of the night candidacy. We saw a ton of finishes. Probably benefited by the smaller cage. I know a lot of people predicted that we'd have the smaller cage tonight, that there would be that kind of conclusion to fights, and they were right. It was certainly seemed to create more action. So overall, letter grade, man, I'm feeling generous tonight. I'm going a strong A-. I feel really good about it. Yeah.
I'm good with an A-. I'm going to piggyback off that A-. I was going to say B+, maybe A-, and I thought you were going to say B+, so I was going to take the shine with the A-, but I'm right here with you, Alex K. Lee. And for those watching right now, I want to remind you, please shout out comments, reactions, questions for this wild event, because we want to hear from you. I've been talking more than enough this week, but AK, let us hear from you, kind sir, a little bit more. Let's start with the main event of the evening. Gilbert Burns putting on the performance of a lifetime, dominates Tyron Woodley from start to finish. This guy was one of my biggest questions heading into this card. Tyron Woodley's probably a little bit higher on that list, but Gilbert Burns, my question was, is this guy the real deal? Can he contend for and compete for a world title? And man, can he ever. This guy answered all the questions. He's a legit threat to everybody at 170 pounds right now. Your reaction, AK, to Gilbert Burns's coming out party to the top 5 of this welterweight division?
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of the talk is going to be about Woodley's performance, much like it was in the Usman fight, Woodley's last fight, how he kind of underperformed, But let's, of course, first give the credit to Gilbert Burns. This is a guy on the rise who I think a lot of people wanted to get behind, but there was some hesitancy of can he beat a guy like Woodley? The Maia fight proved a lot. But, Maia's an older fighter. Woodley's up there, too. I know he's 38 years old, turned 38, I think, in April. But he's still very much viewed by a lot of people as being, near his prime, especially since we only saw him lose once in Usman after winning the title. And also he had kind of a late prime. I mean, Woodley's prime really started around maybe 32, 33. So it's kind of weird to just say, a guy has a five or 6 years and then he's out. But that is how the fight game is sometimes. But yeah, I think a lot of perceive Woodley still as being the number one contender, the former champion coming off his first loss in so many years. So this was a big thing for Burns to prove himself. And Burns looked exactly like the most optimistic projections of Burns that you could have. The stand-up power, for a guy who like his striking is always developing, and he always has that great raw power. Man, that was there. He dropped Woodley early. There's a couple of times in the fight where luckily he might finish him. The grappling, of course, he's known as being a Brazilian jiu-jitsu artist, and the grappling was there. He had a beautiful takedown in the second round, and he just beat Woodley in every aspect of the game. It was really sensational, and you just throw this guy right in there amongst the top 3 or 4 contenders in the welterweight division right now.
Joseph Boza says that. Reminded everybody that Woodley had been out for 15 months heading into that fight. And he says that Gilbert Burns should fight for the belt next. We'll get into that momentarily because he looked tremendous. He hurt Woodley on the feet right away, left that nasty cut over his eye, dominated on the ground. Legit everywhere he dominated this fight. It was a huge win for him. So like Joseph just sort of said, let's play the matchmaker game. Alex, where does Gilbert Burns go after that incredible performance? Because if it were up to him, he'd fight tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely would. He probably wants to fight. Definitely, he's probably sad he's missing out on the pay-per-view next week, right? I do want to say something about. We mentioned the long break for Woodley. I actually thought that it would benefit him. I was of the camp that thought maybe because he had defended his title quite a few times. I think he had the longest active title defense streak for a while there, which was only like 4. Guys just don't have long runs anymore. And I thought he was burnt out, and I thought that the break would do him good. Maybe it did. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about some of his comments after. He didn't sound too deflated by his own performance, even though he lost the fight. But yeah, I thought the break would do him good. Not good enough apparently to beat Burns. Burns now, like I said, he's among the top 3 or 4 guys. You got to throw him in that mix. There's certainly some talk of maybe you match him up with Leon Edwards. Maybe we do a Fight Island thing. I don't know, because Leon is an international fighter. They're certainly looking for big fights for Fight Island whenever that gets rolling. But I also like, of course, the Colby Covington talk. I don't know how much he's on Colby Covington's radar. I know Colby keeps calling him Dilbert, which is just hilarious. But it'd be a great fight. I think it very beneficial to both guys. Burns, you can sell that storyline of, hey, this guy still was running down Brazilians, and then he beat Dos Anjos, he beat Maia. This is my chance to avenge those losses. I want to fight Colby Covington. But he said afterwards he is set on his teammate Kamaru Usman.
I love the idea of Burns versus Leon Edwards next on Fight Island. I think that makes all the sense in the world. I mean, Leon was supposed to fight Tyron, and now Gilbert has just sort of eclipse that at this point. So I think that's a great fight. I think it's a great matchup, and that'd be a legit #1 contender fight if we're being honest here. And Gilbert's gonna be ready for July, so Fight Island makes sense, but he'll be ready for tomorrow or next weekend at UFC 250 if he's needed. But I think the Edwards fight is the one that makes a lot of sense for me. But who knows, Alex, like you just said, he's got a lot of options. Wonder Boy, that'd be an interesting fight because Wonder Boy's top 5 guy. I'd like to see the Covington fight. Not sure if that happens or not because he didn't want to fight a nerd named Dilbert, like you said on his betting prediction video that he put out on Instagram. But that would be a fun fight. But a lot of options for Gilbert Burns right now. That's what happens when you go on these streaks like he's on and show up in big spots. But Tyron Woodley, he's a more interesting question in my opinion right now. I asked Jose this question during the live post-fight press conference live stream we did moments ago. He said Robbie Lawler makes all the sense in the world to rebook that fight since they tried to do it last year. But where does Tyron Woodley go after being dominated for 50 straight minutes in his last 2 fights?
It's a shame that an injury did knock Woodley out of the Lawler rematch, which was supposed to happen I think last year. If I were, it was a UFC on ESPN card last year, or maybe I believe it was supposed to happen last year.
The Minneapolis card.
Because yeah, the Minneapolis card, because it really was the perfect matchup for him. It made a lot of sense. It's a fight that he's very proud of beating Robbie the first time, but Robbie, of course, has always wanted that rematch. And fans of Lawler really wanted to see him try and get that W back against Woodley. It made sense for where they were in their careers. It's a shame that one didn't happen because I think again Woodley would have had a good chance of beating him again. Instead, he found himself in a very, very tough fight against a guy who had a lot more to gain from beating him than Woodley did. The other way around. Another thing I keep dissecting Woodley's performance, but one thing that really struck out to me, because I really bought into the whole, he said he was depressed, after the Usman loss. And, the fight itself, he also looked not there, so he said how bad he felt he looked in that fight. I bought into that. I should have also listened to what he said earlier this week, which was not a good thing when he said he told ESPN he wasn't really motivated to beat Gilbert Burns. He was motivated to fight again. He was motivated to win again. But there was a little bit of disrespect to Burns there. He said, Burns is not a Nick Diaz. Burns is not the kind of championship fighter he's used to. And I feel like that kind of thing came back to bite him. And I really should have put more credit in that when I was making my fight pick.
We got a couple comments.
Let's see.
Edgy Bra, Woodley versus Colby. Still want to see it.
Yes, absolutely. That's a fight the UFC has to consider if Woodley is planning to continue his career, which by all accounts it sounds like he is. That fight will always be here. You could be 2 straight losses for Woodley, 3 straight losses for Woodley. People want to see this business with him and Colby Covington resolved. Just make it happen. It's like with I think remember when Matt Hughes and Matt Serra fought way after they did The Ultimate Fighter. A bunch of other stuff had happened. It was still a fight with a lot of heat behind it, and I think this could be even bigger than that fight was when that fight finally happened.
CT Spivey, Woodley should rematch Lawler. I think that's a good fight. I did see a comment, Burns versus Masvidal. I would be shocked if that fight happens. I'd love to see I'd love to see it. I just don't think it happens right now, especially with Masvidal being so close to a title fight. There's the Nate Diaz rematch that's being discussed for the BMF. That'd be huge. Get better guess. I just saw what the hell's going on here. He's just joking. He said more Limp Bizkit talk. That's why Woodley should fight RDA. I like that fight. I think that fight makes a ton of sense. The RDA fight, Michael Chiesa. That's an interesting matchup. I mean, I'd love to see Colby. If we could do Colby, the heat there will almost make people forget what happened in these last two fights for Woodley. The build up to that fight, it would be part of the story, but it would not be at the forefront at all. It'd be the trash talk between these two guys and this personal rivalry just being settled once and for all. I think we should have had this fight a bunch of times already, and for some reason we still haven't had it. People probably think that the opportunity has been missed here, but I don't. But yeah, I don't think we'll see.
Look, I don't know how much Woodley has left, but like I said, he seems to be motivated still and still wants to fight again. So I wish more top-level fighters would get to rebuild their career, their resumes, kind of like Alistair Overeem. Now, Alistair Overeem was not a UFC champion, but I mean, he's been at the top heavyweight for so long. He's won world championships and other promotions. If you look at his resume, he'll lose fights, and then he'll get 2 fights against, maybe not top 10 guys, but just against other people who are either on the way up. And this is something the UFC doesn't do, whether it's because they don't want to, or again, maybe the fighters don't agree to these fights. But I would like to see them, a lot more fighters be willing to go back a few rungs down the ladder and fight other guys and get 1 or 2 wins back. And then you get another, high-level fight. I know there's only so many years these guys have. There's only so many fights they have on their careers. And again, the compensation might not be where they want to be. So it might not make sense for them. But I wish more people could go that Overeem path and keep kind of scraping and clawing their way back up the mountain over and over again.
I mean, another reason why I like the Colby fight, not just because of the personal rivalry, and we love that stuff, but if Tyron is to overcome this adversity and get motivated again, Colby's the fight that's going to do it for him. I mean, he's not getting a title shot. I mean, I'm sure that might motivate him a little bit, but the Colby fight would get him more motivated than any other one. And then we would get the answers to all of these questions. But he's just, as another commenter said, there's just something about him being so gun shy. He's been like this for a while now. I just don't know. Like, beginning of the second round, I thought the tides, or I don't want to say they were turning, but Tyron came out much more aggressive. He was throwing combinations. He was charging, and then Gilbert had that perfectly timed takedown in the second round, and that made things crazy. Coupe de Grace, Woodley versus Pettis might be good too, but these guys are teammates.
They might be buddies, through Rufus Sports. So I don't know if that fight's would happen. On paper, sure, it'd be cool, but I don't think they have any interest in that.
So another Chiesa. One that I mentioned to Jose wasn't at the top of my list, but I just threw it out there because it would be a main event fight for a fight night card. What about Woodley versus Cerrone?
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, again, these are fights that's exactly actually what I was talking about before, like with the overfitting. That's the kind of fights I wish guys would consider. I know they're dangerous opponents, and again, the money certainly matters. So if you're Woodley, you have to ask yourself, is it worth my money and my time and the amount of fights I have left to fight a guy like Cerrone? So, again, a lot of factors go into it. I don't want to criticize him if that fight came up and he didn't take it, but I know we have to move on. We've picked apart this fight so much, but I will say I actually very much agree with your point of it was surprising how timid he was, and the commentators were pointing out and I think the 3rd or 4th round, how easily Woodley was just giving up ground in the octagon. He would walk himself over to the fence. And again, that's, I guess when you get hit by Gilbert Burns, I would be running away too. But for a fighter of Woodley's level, it was surprising he couldn't find another way to approach as opposed to just giving up ground and letting Burns really dictate where the fight went.
I'll tell you who the real MVP of that fight was. Tyron Woodley's cut man in the first round, because that thing was bleeding like crazy throughout that first round, and I don't think it bled again. Like, I didn't see it bleed again. That guy did a great job, and that was a gnarly cut too, above his left eye. That thing was deep. But
unsung heroes. Heroes.
Might have a Stitch 2.0 here, but let's get to the co-main event. Augusto Sakai gets a victory over Begoy Ivanoff via split decision. By the way, we talked about MVP being the cut man. The non-MVP, the complete opposite of MVP, the LVP, was the judge who scored the fight 30-27 for Ivanoff. That was the worst scorecard of the night by far. But Augusto Sakai gets a huge win. He's won 6 in a row now. Big win on the Contender Series, unbeaten in the UFC. Thoughts on Augusto Sakai's victory and where he may go from here, Alex?
Yeah, look, I think Augusto Sakai is pretty good. I know the Andre Arlovsky, this is his second split decision win in the UFC. I know the Arlovsky win wasn't very convincing. Who knows? That may be a rivalry review topic sometime in the future. But I do remember, I think I may have scored it for Arlovsky, but I didn't think it was like a big travesty or anything. It wasn't like Arlovsky dominated him. I thought maybe he won the fight, but it wasn't the worst thing. Outside of that, he has, again, split decision tonight, and then 2 knockout victories. He looked really, really good against Marcin Tybura, who's a really tough guy to finish. And Sakai took him out in less than a minute. So good stuff there. And I like him. I actually, and I don't even think his performance was that bad tonight. I know it wasn't super exciting. I know it seemed like he just couldn't quite finish off some of those combinations. He kept throwing this head kick that wasn't hitting anything. It wasn't even coming close. But I thought he looked pretty good against a guy like Ivanoff, who's super tough, as we all know, both inside and outside the cage, if people know his story. And also really technical. I mean, he was hitting Sakai a lot. It's not like Sakai could just like wade in there and throw haymakers. He had to be really smart. Otherwise, he was going to get knocked out. So I actually think Sakai is better than people think. I know the style isn't always thrilling, but 4-0 in the UFC is pretty good. I don't know if he quite cracks the UFC's official top 10. He was 13 going to this fight, but he's pretty close. He's at least, as he's wanted, he's at least earned a top 10 opponent.
I would agree with that. I saw Big Ben being thrown out there as a possible opponent. I feel like Big Ben's thrown in all these heavyweight things because it makes sense for everybody. But if we're going to go top 10, and I know that maybe this is too soon to even suggest this, but, you know, that was a 3-round fight. Maybe Walt Harris when he's ready to come back. Like, I feel like that's a good step for both guys. I think Walt Harris is ranked number 9 right now. So, and then Sakai will probably be like number 12. If we're talking about like rankings just one by one, I think Shamil Abdurrahimov is ranked 11. So that'd be, but then logistically it's kind of crazy. But I think Sakai deserves a top 10 fight. He's very fortunate and lucky that the referee did not take a point away for that fence grab. That was crazy. That was that was so, nobody missed that. He's so lucky he got the win. That should have been a draw.
Michael, you have to be good to be lucky and lucky to be good. Yes, it should have been a majority draw because that would have made it 28-28, I believe, the two Sakais, and then 30-26 on the one Georgia scorecard, which, yes, would have been a majority draw. But look, again, luck, these things happen in fights. Blatant grab. The sad thing is, even if the referee had addressed it, he probably would not have taken a point away. They usually don't. I think fence grabs that prevent a takedown should either one be instant point taken away, or you give the fighter attempting the takedown the position, or both, the point and position, which would be amazing. Because I think you really do need to deter takedowns. I did want to say I have to name and shame the judge. His name is who get to 30-27 Ivanov. That is Michael Bell, who actually has done quite a few cards. He is a veteran of UFC and Bellator judging. So no excuses here. I don't know where Michael Bell came from, but I don't know where his head was at in tonight's fight, because it was not a 30-27 fight for Ivanov.
Yeah, the other suggestion I saw, which I knew was coming at some point, was Alexei Oleinik. I feel like Big Ben and Alexei Oleinik are the two guys that get thrown in all this, and that's why we need to put these guys together anyways, Big Ben and Alexei. Next is Begoy versus OSP. Heavyweight OSP? That'd be a wild fight.
Oh, yeah. I'm into that. Yeah.
That'd be a very technical fight.
I'm into anything at heavyweight. It's heavyweight.
It's why, yeah. I mean, OSP was 240 freaking pounds on the scale for his heavyweight fight, so stick around. That'd be fun. I'd be down for that. Although he just lost to Big Ben, who's not in the top 15, so... Look, that'd be a fun fight.
Until we sort out this Miocic, Cormier, Ngannou situation, really, it doesn't. Really, you're just mashing together the pieces from 4 to 15, 20 rankings. There's not that much of a gap between them. I hate to say, you just kind of got to mash them together. A lot of fun, a lot of potentially fun matchups. I
like chaos. Let's just keep doing what we're doing right now. But speaking of chaos, let's talk bonuses, Alex. Let's talk those extra $50,000. Dana White announces at the post-fight press conference that Mackenzie Dern and Gilbert Burns won the performance bonuses, and there are a lot of guys who deserve those performance bonuses. So, but still, I don't disagree with either of those two. Mackenzie Dern, right there, rare submission win, first knee bar, heel hook, leg submission in women's UFC history. So that probably deserves that. Fight of the night goes to Tim Elliott and Brandon Royval. Do you agree with all of those? None of those? One of those? Like, I'm going to guess that you do not agree with fight of the night. Not anything against Elliott and Royval, because they made me look like a genius. That fight was phenomenal. But if we're picking just one fight, and with all due respect to Dana White and the matchmakers, they got this one wrong, and I think Dana White knew they got this one wrong.
Wow, actually, you'd be surprised. I'm going to defend the performance bonus committee on this one. It was very awkward at the post-fight press conference. For anyone who didn't see it, Dana White almost sounded guilty or disappointed in himself and the people who picked the. He said it was. I think he said it was him, Sean Shelby, and McMahon. Yeah, who decided. And he sounded because when he came up and read the bonus, he actually asked the media. He's like, "Who do you guys think won the fight of the night?" And then he read out what the actual fight of the night winner was, and then he was kind of like, yeah, and then he was kind of like, oh yeah, also yeah, Quarantillo, Carlisle, yeah. That was good. And it's like he knew the reaction was coming. So it was kind of like, well, how did you guys come to this conclusion in the first place? That said, I'd have no problem with anyone saying that Royval Elliott was a better fight. I mean, look, Carlisle Quarantillo was a wild fight. Definitely some good moments technically as well. Two talented guys. I think any fight where one guy loses track of time in the fight and walks back to his corner and gets punched almost in the back of the head, I think that can knock you down a notch from the fight of the night first. So I'm okay with Royval and Elliott. That fight was awesome. And it's a shame it couldn't go longer because I think Elliott might have just gassed himself out because since he was fighting at like 100 million% for the 8 minutes or whatever that he was in there. So no, I'm fine with it. Dern's submission was spectacular. And Burns, I'm always in favor of fighters who put on dominant decision wins, getting performance bonuses. I know people like it to be submissions or knockouts, but sometimes a performance like that, a career best performance, has to be rewarded. So I was all for that. And, you could have said the same for Caitlin Chukagian. Unfortunately, I hope she gets something too, as does, again, all the other guys who got great finishes. Chris Gutierrez, Roosevelt Roberts, just Casey Kenny. It was a really, really good night for a lot of fighters.
Yeah, I think Spike Carlisle, I'm sorry, Billy Quarantillo won the fight. So it's Billy Quarantillo versus Spike Carlisle. And I like that fight so much because one guy won, one guy lost, and it was a very close decision that could have gone either way. And I think if Spike won, I think more people probably would have been in agreement. I actually scored it for Billy Q, and not just because I picked him to win by decision on our little Topology page that we do. But that fight was awesome. And both guys, their stock completely rose. Like Billy Q, his stock is as high as it's ever been. And then Spike Carlisle, despite the loss, completely rose. I mean, maybe even more so. But,
Mike, it's classic pro wrestling booking, man. Like one guy goes over, the other guy gets over, brother. That's how it goes, right? One guy gets to win, and then the other guy gets over. The second thing I want to mention is it's funny you mention your Topology picks, Mike, because why don't you tell people you had an excellent night on Topology Picks. I'm not slandering anyone. I was terrible. I'll share those. Well, people can see my predictions on MMAfighting.com. They're horrible. You had an excellent night. That was marred only by two things. You picked Burns. You picked Woodley to win the main event. And Mike, what was the other unfortunate blemish on your picks, your Topology selections?
So I picked Woodley to win the main event. And it was more of a strategic pick to do that because I felt like, who's everybody else going to pick? And I thought the majority of people would pick Gilbert Burns. And I thought potentially would come down to the last one. But all day long, I said to myself, I picked Mackenzie Dern to win by first round submission.
As we all did.
And then I go and look at it, and I was like, oh, my God, I picked Hannah Cyphers by first-round submission. I was like, what? How does that happen? I was like, and you could tell by how the fight ended in what round that there's no way I picked Hannah Cyphers in that fight because there's no way I was picking her to win by first-round submission. And by the way, I actually was looking pretty good with the accidental pick until she didn't separate. Like, she got taken down. I'm like, whoop.
Oh, she went in there. She went in there. She was like, I'm going in. I'm going to the there it is. Oh, there it is. Look at that.
There it is.
But you should thank Gilbert Burns for winning that main event and ruining your Woodley pick because otherwise we would have never let you hear the end of the Cyphers thing. You may have wanted to say, guys, that I meant to pick Dern, and we would be like, no, we'd never let you get away with it. So as it is, 9 of 11. Fantastic performance, and you don't have to worry about would you have had a perfect card or not. It doesn't matter.
That's true. Had some perfect picks too throughout, but the card was great. It delivered in a lot of ways. We touched on some of the other performances, but let's get down to the basement of the card, so to speak, from the curtain jerker, maybe the first few fights. Chris Gutierrez, great performance. Another rare finish. I think it was the 10th fighter to get a leg kick TKO win, the 11th overall, because I think Edson Barboza got it twice. So that makes it 11 overall. Yes. Casey Kenny looked fantastic, getting a submission win over a very tough Louis Smolka on short notice. He was the last guy to hit the scales yesterday, was he not?
Yeah, I believe he was last. It It was him, or
It was.
I mean, I think
Casey
he
was.
was
Yeah,
last.
Kenny
Yeah,
was the
you're
last
correct.
one.
Yes, correct.
And then it was the Roy Val fight, but Casey Kenny big win for him. Calls out Henry Cejudo, which I dug. It just was a funny one. He likes to throw these names.
Why not?
Every time I've interviewed him, he throws out a name. It's just so wild, and I love it. Casey Kenny looks good. What's next?
I want to say first about the Chris Gutierrez, Vince Morales. Yes, he was the recipient of that TKO, the leg kick TKO, and he later tweeted out a picture of Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump from the boat saying, "This is me and my legs after the fight at the UFC Apex." So a good sport, Vince Morales, and a fun interview. A good guy to talk to. Kenny, man, yeah, taking out Smoko. Smoko's a veteran and a fight finisher himself, so that's a huge win. Oh, please, that's not my. Oh no. It's on MMAfighting.com. I can't hide anyway. But it looks so much worse though when you just lay it out like that. Yeah, people, they let me write my predictions for MMAfighting.com. So I'm a glutton for punishment. Okay, I'm a glutton for punishment. I admit it. What's next for Casey Kenny? I mean, I think he's probably aiming a little too high, going for not just Cejudo, but going for like a top 5 opponent. And I'm not saying he's not competitive enough to be able to do that, but that's probably a bridge too far for him right now. Especially since he lost his last fight right to Merab Dvalishvili. I'm gonna take a quick glance. Sorry, I'm buying myself time as I take a quick load up my own little personal rankings here. This is the definitive rankings, not the UFC rankings, people. You got to have your own rankings, okay? There's too much politics. Too much politics. Song Yadong.
That's interesting.
Test his luck, right, Mister? As Cody Stamen calls him, the luckiest man in the UFC. That's the first name that just popped up to me. I like that. Maybe I was gonna say Jimmy Rivera, but Jimmy Rivera's on a losing streak. He is still highly ranked, so I think if Kenny would want that fight, he could probably get it. I just don't know how much that would benefit Kenny really at this point. I see a lot of veteran names ahead of him, but I do like the Song Yadong. I do like the idea of a Song Yadong, maybe a Ricky Simone.
That's a good one.
Yeah, there's a lot of good hungry bantamweights, like just outside the top 10 in that next tier, like 11 to 20. A lot of good hungry guys.
I'll tell you what fight I want to see in the future, and it may not happen right now, but I would like to see it. I have a feeling these two guys will collide at some point. I want to see Casey Kenny versus Montel Jackson at some point.
Oh, yes,
that is going to be bananas.
Good. Yeah,
that would be a bananas fight. But man, it's very hard to match up two prospects like that this quickly. But I'm in. I'm all in on that fight. Even if they did it now, and I'm sure Casey Kenny, because he wants to fight so frequently and stay as active as possible, he would probably take that fight at this point. He doesn't care.
He'll fight anyone.
And Chris Gutierrez, good win. I liked his callouts as well. Andre Ewell, I knew he was going to say because of the Jonathan Martinez fight. But Miles Johns is a fun one too. Which one do you prefer if you had the choice?
I like Miles Johns. I mean, I just like Miles Johns in general. But yeah, I like the idea of a matchup with him and Royval. So I like that. I like that one a lot. Sorry, I want to skip ahead here. Well, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about him later, so I guess I shouldn't skip ahead. But I did want to talk about. Just remind me to talk about Gabe Green before we end the show. But I'm sorry. Let's keep going in order, as it were.
Okay, no, let's go. Let's talk Gabe Green right now. You go ahead. Lead the way, my friend.
Gabe Green clearly lost a unanimous decision to Daniel Rodriguez. Daniel Rodriguez, by the way, looking great so far. He beat Tim Means by submission in his debut. That was awesome. And now, yes, he got a short notice opponent, but that can be a very dangerous thing. I know it's a guy he's familiar with. They know each other from the California regional scene. But even then, it's like you just never know what's going to happen. You go from fighting a guy in Kevin Holland who's making a name for himself to a guy in Gabe Green who's going to make his name off you if he beats you. He comes out of nowhere, less than 1 week's notice. What a Cinderella story if he beats you. Everyone expects you to win. It's not always easy to dominate under those circumstances. But Rodriguez was great, very accurate striking. But I love Gabe Green's attitude. This is a guy, again, coming in on, I believe, 4 days' notice. And just saying, I'm just going to go in. I'm going to go. If I get knocked out, I get knocked out. But he was going in. He was throwing, taking a lot of damage. But you got to love that attitude. There's a lot of people in this card who I think are going to be favorites for Dana White in the future. We mentioned Spark Carlisle. Casey Kenny, I think, is going to be one of those guys. Gilbert Burns already is. And I think Gabe Green, I don't know how long his UFC career is going to last with that style, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun once he gets to drop back down to 155.
First decision win since his amateur or first decision in general. He didn't win the fight, but first decision in general since his amateur debut, which is crazy. But that the one thing he hated about decisions was it was a close decision his first fight. So he hated the fact that he wasn't sure if his hand was going to get raised or not. But this one, it was kind of a no-doubter. I'm sure he knew that he didn't win. But admirable performance, jumping up a weight class. He has fights at 170 in his career, but he's mostly a 55er. He's fought at 60, maybe 65. But you could tell like he was outsized in a big way to Daniel. But like I said on Twitter, like good old JR says, tougher than a $2 steak. Just by 2 cents. Roberts, Hill, and Kenny looked awesome. Yes, Roosevelt Roberts. He looked phenomenal. He looked fantastic against Brock Weaver. He was a huge favorite, and he delivered a performance like he was one of the biggest favorites on the card. This guy's got a great future. I think he learned a ton from that Vince Pichel fight.
Yes.
Because it was kind of like a deja vu fight all over again with Yakovlev in Moscow. But, man, he needed to go out there and take on a guy who missed weight. He was not too happy about that. The Twitter account thing, obviously that wasn't him. We've cleared that up at this point. But he needed to go out there and have that performance. He delivered in a big way. I mean, this guy's got a very bright future ahead of him, does he not?
He's an exciting prospect, man. I mean, you just look at him. He's got great measurements. You know, just if you're just talking physical measurements, tall guy, good range. Seems to really know how to use it well. This is something I talked about in my prediction for this fight. Was we see guys with great physical gifts not always figure out how to use them, and he's very early on showing that he knows how to use that jab. He knows how to use his height and his reach. And again, it takes some guys a lot older than him. I think he's 27. There's a lot of guys that a lot more had been around longer than him that never figured that out. So he looked great. I love what you said about the Vince Pichel thing and the Yakovlev fight, because I think losing to Pichel, that's one of those, he's going to look back on that for the rest of his career as when things really turned around for him. Because I remember there's a lot of hype around him going into that fight, and I actually picked Pichel because I think Pichel's the kind of guy who takes pride in fighting prospects, and he certainly did in that fight, and he really, he really taught Roberts a thing or two. So Roberts learned from that, beat Yakovlev, and now really I would say just dominated Brock Weaver, which is what he should do based on what we've seen, I think, in his last 2 or 3 fights. So huge step up performance from him on a ESPN main card. Definitely one to watch. Really, really liked what we saw from Roberts tonight.
Just by 2 cents, that smaller cage was word up. They were getting after it tonight.
No escape.
I mean, I liked it. It was great. It was like it was literally like watching Contender Series fights. Like, obviously not from skill level perceptions, but there's a reason why we love Contender Series so much. I mean, the fighters are great and the fights are always delivering on that show, but big reason is because of the small cage, and we got to see it in action tonight, from Contender Series versus Contender Series matchups to the main event itself. I dug it. I think the UFC should do this much more, and they're going to be at the Apex for a while anyway, so we're going to see a lot more of this.
It was perfect for guys, and I know I'm about to name a couple guys who lost, but guys like Tim Elliott and Gabe Green, who just want to get in their opponent's faces and stay there the whole fight. It was easy. They took like 2 steps forward, boom, you're engaged, you're in the pocket. There's really, and that's what made for some really, really, really fun fights. Again, really, there wasn't. I know people are going to rag on the heavyweight co-main event. There actually was quite a bit of output, I thought, from both guys for the most part, at least when we're talking about heavyweights. Caitlin Chukagian, look, we haven't talked about her much, but man, Antonina Shevchenko, she's a great kickboxer. Range fighting was really just not an option, especially not the way Chukagian approached this fight. She just walked her down, got a hold of her, took her down, used her wrestling brilliantly. Could that have happened in the bigger cage? Probably, but it would have been harder to do. And Chukagian made the most of that small cage and just dominated that fight.
Another fighter that stuck out in a lot of people's minds before we wrap this up, Jamal Hill had a great win over Clinton Abreu. And here's my thought on the next step, okay, for Jamal Hill. I want to see Jamal Hill versus Ed Herman. That's what I want to see.
Wow. I did not see that coming. Yes, Ed Herman, longtime middleweight, has sort of prolonged his career by moving up to 205. Would fit the category of gatekeeper, I suppose, though.
He's got 2 wins in a row, though.
He does. I'm looking at it now, and you had to remind me. I think would like to see Jamal face someone a little bit lower down the rankings. I'm just taking a glance at some of the names here. Kennedy and Nzechukwu, I think, would be interesting. Alexa Kamer. Da Un Jung, I think, would be, if anyone remembers him. He's also 2-0 in the UFC so far. So again, I have some very raw rankings here, so I'm not really thinking about style matchup, or I'm just looking at the win streaks and who's kind of in the range. But Ed Herman, I could see that fight being made though. If we're talking about fights that make sense from a matchmaker standpoint, yeah, I could see that. Kind of test where he is as a prospect, because he took a big leap, I think, from his first fight to this one, and really did a good job against Abreu. So. Yeah, I don't know if I'm as high on him as I am on like a Roosevelt Roberts, but there's no arguing with 8-0 and a great finish tonight, man. That knee to the body. I mean, he was tuning him up already, but that knee to the body was scary. Like when that hit, you know, with no one in the crowd, you're like, that had to be a rib going or something. Like that was rough.
We're gonna we'll lightning round some questions here if we have them. Joseph Boza said Antonina didn't really look like herself without Valentina in her corner. We'll answer that question after. I want to get your thoughts on that, because honestly, I'm sure it had some effect maybe with the approach on the fight, but I don't think that fight goes any differently, if we're being honest. Like the fact that Antonina Shevchenko was the favorite tonight was just crazy. Like people must have cleaned up in a big way at the betting window, because I mean, I understand she came off a finish loss to Valentina, but I mean, from the like this is too much too soon, is it not? I mean, Roxanne to Caitlin Chookagian. I mean, come on, like this is bad matchmaking. Like Roy Valen Elliott, tremendous matchmaking. Shevchenko versus Chookagian, terrible matchmaking.
I read on Twitter that someone said she said that she was asked about the odds, and that she said maybe they thought I was my sister. So even Antonina apparently was surprised. Again, I saw this on Twitter, so I'm not sure the veracity of this quote, but apparently, at least even she was somewhat surprised by how the odds makers had picked her. Yeah, I don't know if it goes differently with Valentina in the corner. I'm sure it'd be a little bit of a less unpleasant experience. You know, so maybe she could have helped her out of some of those trouble spots. But no, as we said, Chookagian, look, she's a number 2 contender for a reason. She is a very good fighter, and also that small cage, there was just no escaping whatever with the game plan that Chookagian's team had come up with for tonight. Small cage, no way to get away from that.
As you can see there, any final questions before we all get some sleep?
Well, we just saw that Dana White.
Yeah, okay. Can you bring the Dana White John Jones question up, Casey, if you don't mind? I just want to see it. All right, Jeffrey Ortega. Alex, I'm going to throw you the question because I don't want to answer this right now. I will, but who's lying, John Jones or Dana White? Because we've seen this go on for 3-4 days now. Okay, yesterday Dana White had a much different approach to this John Jones situation than he did tonight. Tonight, he said that John Jones and Hunter Campbell had not just a conversation, but they had a very good conversation. And things, I don't know if they were worked out or not, but it was a very good conversation, much different direction than it was before. So do you believe John Jones when he says what he says, that he didn't ask for Deontay Wilder money? Or do you believe Dana White when he says that he did ask for Deontay Wilder money?
Okay, well, I'm glad that this does not appear to be a binary question, because they're both lying. That obviously neither of them is telling the full. Neither of them is telling the full truth. What are we doing here? Are we taking social media quotes as truth, or anything that Dana White says as truth? Come on now. Dana White said today, like, what do I have to gain from lying? I was like, you have a lot to gain from lying. You've lied before, and you've gained from it, and you could lie again and gain from it in the future. Let's not be naive here, okay? Of course. Which is not to say everything they're saying is a lie, by the way. The truth is clearly somewhere in between. But I don't know if I believe John Jones saying that he never threw out a number. I think that's what he said. It never got to the point of negotiation, something to that effect. So he said, I don't believe that. I'm sure he mentioned something. Dana White certainly cannot be believed. He was asked point blank today, I believe, by Oscar Willis that are you going to show those text messages? He's like, why should I? What do I have to gain from showing the text messages? I was like, well, why would you even bring them up? How can you bring them up to reinforce your opinion? And then say, oh, but I'm not going to show them to you. So I'm not saying he has to show it. I'm just saying as long as he doesn't, we are allowed to question his claims. So both guys are lying to some degree. Both guys are telling the truth to some degree. I know that sounds like I'm on the fence, but really I'm just telling you guys to be smart and just use your logic as far as figuring out what is fact that these guys are bringing up and what is fiction. It's not that hard to sort.
So we have like conflicting arguments here. Joseph Boza says Dana's lying. Edgy Bra, I believe it was. So John Jones is lying. Edgy Bra. There you go. Edgy Bra.
You guys are both right.
I'll say I believe Dana more today. Okay. He didn't throw out any numbers. He said Deontay Wilder money. And if you go back and do your research, you know that Deontay, contractually was scheduled to make $30 million or so for his last fight. Dana White tonight said that Jon Jones said, I don't know, 15, 20 million. Okay. 15 million, I don't think is that unreasonable for a guy like Jon Jones. He's probably making at least five for every fight when it comes down to it. Once you dot the I's and cross the T's and throw the little under the table stuff, it's probably close to five with the pay-per-view points and all that stuff. I would say that. But for a fight like this, which would do really well, I think just even the casual fans would be into this because Francis Ngannou is such a killer and they all know who Jon Jones is. I don't think 15 is that unreasonable. I don't. And our own Mike Chiappetta wrote a great column about this today, which you can find on MMAfighting.com. But just give him, if he wants 15 million, give him the 15 million for Christ's sake. I mean, come on.
Look, and look at even Ngannou. Ngannou, I think they said made 130,000 guaranteed, I think, for his last fight. And I don't know, maybe there's a plus 130 win bonus, but even less than $300,000 for the excitement that someone like Francis Ngannou brings to the cage, for the streak he's on, the name that he's kind of made for himself. That's absurd. That's absurdly low. And I think I'm not going to pretend I know the exact financial details of the UFC, but I think people would be shocked if they ever found out, how much money the UFC makes. And by the way, the UFC is pretty big on touting its own success when it wants to, when it's convenient to do so. So think about that and how much, it would not destroy them to compensate someone like Jon Jones, like you said, what he's asking, 15 million, even even 10 million, because if they can afford to pay Conor McGregor that much, I can't remember, allegedly he made 30 million or something for a fight. That's what Conor McGregor said. You can afford to pay Jon Jones that much. I'm not saying he's a McGregor level draw, but if he's the pound for pound best fighter and someone who has proven he can draw against certain opponents in the past, and I think Ngannou would be one of them, then yeah, 15 million is not unreasonable. So like I said, not everyone's telling the truth, but there is truth in some of the statements that these guys are making. Yeah,
throwing Ngannou 7 figures, $1 million, even $1 million. Even $1 million's a big step up for him. That's still I'm sure he ain't turning down $1 million. Jon Jones has earned this at this point. I don't have a problem with 15 million. I know we're in tough times, but we're still trying to keep this train moving, and that is the biggest fight you can make right now. Honestly, there's other big fights out there, like Adesanya versus Costa is a big fight, right? And then Usman versus Masvidal is a big fight. But I think Jones and Ngannou is bigger than both of those fights. I think there's more intrigue with that fight than the other two, and it's not even close.
And look, you bring out Usman, Masvidal. Now I don't know. I think it's Masvidal who keeps saying that Usman has priced himself out of the fight. I'm just saying, people, look into this if you can. You guys should know. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're right.
Sorry. Shout out to Eddie Bravo. I'm saying, people, you got to realize, I know I've been saying this probably in a bunch of other shows we've done for MMA fighting, that if you want fights to happen, you guys have got to support this idea that fighters need to make more. I know in general with athletes, sometimes people think athletes get paid too much, but you can't have it both ways. You can't want everything you want, every fight to happen, and also say, well, but I also don't care what fighters get paid. The reason these fights aren't happening, Usman, I don't know how much he's asking for, but he's very much in the right to ask for a certain amount of money and ask for more money to fight someone like Masvidal. And Masvidal should be asking for more money too. He shouldn't be blaming Usman for wanting more money. He should be working together so they can make more money. But that's a very far bridge and another discussion entirely.
Can you imagine if the UFC came out on Tuesday and said that Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou was going to headline UFC 250 on 5 days' notice? This thing would just explode. I mean, it would be the biggest thing ever. It'd be the biggest thing ever.
And you know what? Wouldn't be surprising at all. Because why? Because MMA. Yeah. Nothing is surprising anymore. And if anything, it's the old joke. When Dana White says something isn't going to happen, it's probably going to happen at some point. So, but I don't know. So last thing I'm going to ask you, because I asked Jose this question, I want to get your thoughts on it before we wrap things up. Within 90 days from right now, Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou will be at least booked. Oh, is it true or false?
I'm asking you, do you think within 90 days from right now, Jones versus Ngannou will have either happened or at least be booked for a future card?
That is a good question. Because I'm an optimist, Mike. I am the eternal optimist, and I really want to see this fight. I've seen some people saying this fight popped up out of nowhere, and it's no, this kind of came up I believe as recently as last year when, Jones was again making overtures towards possibly moving to heavyweight. Ngannou was certainly one of the names that people were like, man, it'd be cool to see Jones fight Ngannou. It's like that's something on paper I'd love to see. So this isn't new. I mean, the mutual discussion between them is I guess somewhat fresh, but the idea isn't new. This has been brought up before. Gosh, I want to be optimistic, but no, Mike, I don't think within 90 days we see the fight booked. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of very real. This is the optimistic part of me, that this is a lot of very real talk about negotiations, and that it's making more people aware of why these big fights don't always happen. So I think for the good of the sport, it's not going to happen, and people will, it'll make people think about why it didn't. Or I hope so anyway. So that's the silver lining to it.
There you go. I saw an and remember on there, ... but not really sure if there's anything before or after that. But I think we're
cryptic from our own.
Don't forget chest day, everybody, with Sage Northcutt just looking all sorts of shredded right now.
Sage Northcutt
just making me feel.
There we go. Yeah, I mean that's what I look like pretty much anyway. So Sage is really representing for both of us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And me too, obviously. I think we're done here. I think we've hit this card pretty hard.
What a great show.
Done a great job. And shout out to all you guys for all the questions and stuff. Love when that happens. We could chime in and do all this crazy stuff. But a lot happened tonight from start to finish. Great performances by all. I would clap louder, but my kid is asleep, and if I wake him up, my wife will be really pissed at me. So for Alex K. Lee, I am Mike Heck. Thank you guys all so much for watching all of this post-fight coverage and all the coverage for UFC on ESPN 9 throughout the week. Next week, it's pay-per-view time, which means things are going to get even bigger. June 6th, next Saturday night, Amanda Nunes versus Felicia Spencer is the main event. And maybe, if my idea comes to fruition, John Jones versus Francis Ngannou.
On less than 1 week's notice. Promotional malpractice, sir. Promotional malpractice. But yes, back at the UFC Apex. This the new normal, my friends, UFC Apex.
It's a pretty good card. They posted the graphic. It's a great card. Main event. Listen, say what you want about the main event. The rest of the card looks really good. It looks really good. Sterling versus Sandhagen. Woo! That fight is too good. And the last thing I want to say is the tweet of the night belongs to Marlon Moraes for calling out Dominic Cruz. That fight I need injected into my body, and I've needed it for like 3 or 4 years right now. That is the fight to make. There should be no hesitation. That fight needs to be booked ASAP. But for Alex K. Lee, I am Mike Heck. Thank you all so much. We are out of here. What the Heck coming back on Thursday. We got some other stuff in the works as well, but thank you all for tuning in.